Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. What's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG. So with this video, I wanted to go over the Witch-King of Angmar. First of all, I do have to comment on the art because I'm a big art guy when it comes to Magic the Gathering. This is one of my favorite arts in the new Lord of the Rings set. Also, he does have a good chunk of abilities as well when he does have flying, and whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to you, each opponent sacrifices a creature that dealt combat damage to you this turn. The ring tempts you. So in a way, it kind of feels like No Mercy on a creature. He does also have another ability. When you discard a card, you can make him indestructible. He does have flying and he's a 5/3 body, not too shabby. I mean, somebody will lightning bolt the Witch King and he might die, especially if you don't have a card to discard. But if you do have a card to discard, they'll just waste that lightning bolt. So overall, I do think the Witch-King of Angmar is definitely build aroundable. There's a lot of ways we could use some of his abilities, so let's discuss some of them. So to start out the first section of the video, I do want to talk about thematic parts of the deck, mainly because this is Lord of the Rings. I've been doing it with most of my deck techs where I've been talking about different cards. So the first one I did want to bring up is the Morgul Knife. It's a great equipment and especially a great reskin, mainly because the Morgul Knife is a classic blade in the Lord of the Rings and also has some great abilities of giving your creature lifelink and trample and a +1/+1. And our creature is flying with the Witch King. We're going to be losing a lot of life, so if we could swing in the air, get a couple hits, we could gain a lot of life out of the Morgul Knife. On top of that, permanents your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. That's a great ability. And what happens when you stab somebody with a Morgul Knife? They have a Morgul Knife wound. So I thought this was more thematic if anything else. You don't have to add into the deck because it's honestly not that great. You enchant a creature, enchanted creature gets -3/-0 and has at the beginning of your upkeep, exile this creature unless you pay 2 life. In most cases, you can stick it on somebody else's commander. They will lose 2 life in most cases because they don't want to get rid of their commander right away to gain value. So I guess it is one to consider. Another card you should consider is the One Ring to rule them all. It does have 3 lore chapters. I love this specifically mainly because you see the Nazgul below Sauron. However, it does have some great abilities. The first one is pretty great. The ring tempts you, then each player mills cards equal to your ring bearer's power, so that includes ourselves as well. The second lore chapter states destroy all non-legendary creatures, and the last lore chapter reads each opponent loses 1 life for each creature in that player's graveyard. This is definitely all upside for us as we want to have a lot of cards in our graveyard and our opponent's graveyard. Of course, we must have the Nazgul in the deck. They do have Death Touch. When the Nazgul enter the battlefield, the ring tempts you, and whenever the ring tempts you, put a 1/1 counter on each Wraith you control, and a deck can have up to 9 cards named the Nazgul. So you could add all 9 if you'd like. I'm going to add only 8, mainly because the Witch King is the head of the deck. We already have 9 including the Witch King. But again, if you wanted to have up to 9 Nazgul in the deck, you're more than welcome to. However, it is pretty fitting. They buff up each other whenever another Wraith enters the battlefield so that they can look pretty intimidating. Also, Death Touch is just chef's kiss on top of that. Another fitting character to add into the list would be no other than Sauron the Necromancer. He does have Menace, and whenever Sauron the Necromancer attacks, exile target creature from your graveyard. You create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black Wraith with Menace. Also, at the beginning of your next end step, exile that token unless Sauron is your ring bearer. So say for example one of your Wraiths are in the graveyard, you could easily reanimate them with Sauron. Kind of, you just exile them, put it back onto the battlefield as a copy. But when one of those Nazgul enter the battlefield, you could choose Sauron as your ring bearer because when they enter the battlefield, the ring tempts you. So with some of the thematic choices out of the way, I also did want to show you some cards you may want to consider adding to the deck. Some of them are actually kind of thematic as well, but I did want to point them out mainly because they're just great overall. The first one I do want to suggest is Orcish Bowmasters. This is absolutely incredible. It does have flash, and when it enters the battlefield and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target. then amass Orcs 1. You're going to be throwing so much damage around because people want to be drawing cards so much, especially in Commander. Also on top of that, Shadow of the Enemy is absolutely incredible in the deck, mainly because if our opponents are constantly being milled with some of our cards in the deck, and if a specific opponent has some deadly threats in their arsenal, in their graveyard, we could take advantage of that by exiling all creature cards from their graveyard. When we do that, we could cast spells from those exiled cards with any kind of mana we have to produce. So this is definitely a great include you may want to consider adding to the deck. Let's follow up with another card with No Mercy. I did mention this in the beginning. Of course we have to add it to the deck because the Witch-King is all about No Mercy. Whenever a creature deals damage to you, you destroy it. Again, I thought I would give it a quick mention, mainly because it deals with our commander's ability in a weird way. Since we will be discarding a lot of cards with our commander, we want to make sure we get some card draw. Call to the Ring is absolutely incredible in any kind of deck you want to be tempted with. So at the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. Whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, you draw a card. This is just going to provide so much advantage for us. We definitely want to include it into the deck. Again, we do want a lot of card draw in the deck so that we can refill our hands when we're discarding cards. Stinging Suddy will provide that advantage. You draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of the commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. So with the Witch-King as your commander, you'll be able to draw 5 cards. That's just great value, especially for 5 mana. I did also want to take your attention to the Reanimator strategy because that's the big focus of the deck. There's a lot of different reanimation tools in our arsenal that we could rely on getting big creatures in the battlefield at all times. So we do have some great reanimation spells like Persist, Stitch Together, and Reanimate. There's a lot more into the deck in the deck list down below if you do want to go check it out. Here's just some examples where you can just reanimate a target creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. That's simple enough. I did also want to bring your attention to Rise of the Dark Realms, mainly because it's a big splashy way to win the game. It simply states put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. That includes your opponents as well. Think about it, how many times are you going to go across games where late game you need a big giant spell to win the game? Rise of the Dark Realms is your card to do that. So you're probably thinking to yourself, what kind of cards do we want to reanimate? There's a lot of different options we may want to consider in the deck. The first one I did think about is Archon of Cruelty, mainly because it kind of looks like a Wraith when you look at it, but it does have some big splashy abilities. Whenever Archon of Cruelty enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker, discards a card, and loses 3 life, and you draw a card and you gain 3 life. That's just a lot of abilities stapled onto one creature. And since that ability is also an ETB, you can get immediate value when you reanimate it. The next card I do want to discuss is Villas, Broker of Blood. I put it in so many of my Reanimator decks because it puts so much work in. It acts as a removal spell. On top of that, it acts as drawing cards. Whenever you lose life, you draw that many cards. So when you pay into that activation by paying a black mana and pay 2 life, you're actually going to be drawing 2 cards on top of that. This is absolutely incredible draw engine, no question about it. Of course, I had to mention Sheoldred, the Whispering one. This is just a classic all-star in reanimation strategies. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. It does have Swamp Walk as well. Again, a classic all-star in many reanimation strategies. I did want to share with you the other Sheoldred, not Sheoldred the Apocalypse, that's terrifying standard. I'm talking about Sheoldred, just Sheoldred, that's it. It does have some crazy abilities, mainly on the backside with the Saga. The front side does have Menace, and whenever Sheoldred enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. That's great just right there. You could also activate her, turning into the True Scriptures. It does have 3 different lore chapters. For the first lore chapter, for each opponent destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. For the second one, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards. And for the last lore chapter, you essentially get another Rise of the Dark Realms. Then on top of that, you will flip Sheoldred. Her enter of the battlefield will trigger again, making each opponent sacrifice a non-token creature. I'll tell you what, Sheoldred is absolute gas. You definitely want to have it in the deck, mainly so that you can win the game off of her Saga ability. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on the Witch-King of Angmar. This is absolutely a fun commander. Not the most powerful in my opinion. I feel like there's other powerful commanders that came out in the set for the new Lord of the Rings set. With that being said, would you build the Witch-King of Angmar? Is there other commanders you'd like to see built? Let me know down below in the comments. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.